right, here we go. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the inaugural production of Global Minds Unleashed, where we take minds from around the globe and think about ways to unleash them from what often constrains us, keeping us siloed in either a continent or a group of connected people. And so this is brought to you by Shed and GeoSwerve Consulting. GeoSwift Consultancy is a group of counselors who are helping students and parents and businesses think beyond what they typically do, to think more globally, not just for their business, but also for their education. That is co-founded by Emily Dobson. And the Shed is part of In the Fleisch BU Incorporated, where Shed is the state of higher education discussions. So this is the first Shed plus GeoSwerve Global Minds Unleashed. We've got some great guests with us, and our co-host, Emily Dobson, is going to be able to share with us some statistics that will guide our discussion a little bit more. My name is Sam Fleischman, host of Shed, and Emily, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Thanks, Sam. Well, I just wanted to thank everybody for being here today. And the first statistic that I think we brought up, Sam, was when we were deciding on a topic, how does one geoswerve? In other words, how does one maybe in education end up in a place that isn't typical? And we were battling around a lot of different ideas, and it came to me that parents are probably the very first 100% people to influence some of these decisions. And we were looking around at different podcasts, and we saw a lot of admissions representatives and counselors and different types of people, but not a lot of parents. And just the idea of exploring this as a source of influence that drives these kids to different places was of great interest, I think, to both of us, Sam. And
yeah, thanks for that. And so we're gonna introduce our three parental guests, and Marta, Denny, and Patrick are joining us from Brazil and from Southeast Asia. And I've got a question here for you. This first one is to each introduce yourself briefly and share your cultural background and how it influenced your perspective on higher education for your child or your children. And in your case, is all of you, it's your children.
Thank you for inviting me. Really happy to be here because this is a topic that is really keen for me. And so I worked with initially technology in education. So I got involved with research and some contacts with universities in the US and researchers, very interesting people. Worked for 9 years at an international school in Porto Alegre, where I was born. And then I moved to Panama. Nowadays, that's 2 years. I've been based in Panama, working for a Jewish international school.
Denny, if we could have you do a quick cultural background for us.
For sure, yeah. So I'm basically from India, born and brought up there. And I did my studies as well. So by academics, I am an engineer. So I did computer engineering. And I also did MBA afterwards.
Patrick, can you briefly share your cultural background and some of the influence for your perspective on higher education?
I will, Sam, thank you. And thank you to you and Emily for inviting me to be part of this inaugural podcast. It's great. So I was born in the United Kingdom sometime in the last century, and grew up there, went to university there, and started teaching in the southeast of the United Kingdom. And then had my first international school job in Switzerland, where my wife Karen and I worked at the International School of Geneva between 1992 and 1996 to 2002. And we had our two children there who are UK citizens, US citizens. And that comes into play a little bit with the latter part of your question, Sam, about considering college placements. But from my cultural context, growing up in the UK, there was never any conversations about studying outside of the UK. It was really whether you're going to focus on sort of the Russell Group schools or try something different.
Emily, do you have anything to share to that before I kind of go on to the next question?
Well, I was going to dive into a mid question here just really quickly. One of the things that we talk a lot about, all of you have moved all over the place. You brought your kids with you, or you had a choice what type of school you would educate your kids in. And I think it seems that all of us ended up going to the international school system, right, as opposed to maybe the in-country national school system. And I would just like to put out there, was there ever a doubt in your mind that you would choose an international school for your children? Did you ever look at the country's national system wherever you were located and say, if it was an option, this is something I might choose for my child, pre-college, going to higher education? Because I think that's part of it. And a lot of parents ask that question when they move around, is what school they're going to put their child in for primary and secondary.
Maybe I can share my experience there. So I'm not from the education side of the house. So I'm from the corporate side of the house. So it depends on the nature of the job that you have as well. So sometimes when you are a consultant, it's not easy for you to make those choices to put your kids into a national school. For example, so when I moved to Brazil, I moved from Malaysia to Brazil. So I came to Brazil, so for 2 years. So I was supposed to be here just for 2 years. And then it was very important for me that if I leave the country, then my kids should be able to adapt to a new education system pretty easily. And it have to be an English medium. Yeah, so that was one of the priorities for me. So for me, there was no other choice than going to an international school. Yeah. So otherwise, if I try to put them into a Brazilian school, and if they have to, of course, so struggle to learn the language, and it takes at least 2 to 3 years to learn the language. And then they have to study all the subjects in Portuguese, which is not easy for them because they have to learn physics, chemistry, biology, mathematics, all of this in Portuguese, which is very difficult. And then after 2 years, if I'm going out of the country, if I'm going to another country where I have to put them into an English medium school, so that's a big struggle for the children. So it depends on the duration that you are planning as well to stay in a country. So if you are planning for, say, so several years, then, putting your children into a, local school, so that would be an option. But otherwise, so you have to be extremely careful because it puts a lot of pressure on your children as well to learn a new language. And all your children do not have, so this linguistic skills. My daughter was very good with languages, but my son was not. Yeah. So this is something that I can add here as well. So when my daughter did her, education after schooling in Germany, in German medium, I also wanted my son to be somewhere, so in that geography, so it's easy for the family. Yeah. But then he told me one thing, so I'm not going to study one more language. So I want to be in an English speaking country. Yes. And then he opted for United States. So every children, so that they have their own skills, their own, so strengths and weaknesses. So this is also something you have to consider while choosing the school.
I think that's a helpful point, right? Because we have a lot of options, but we have to go back and reflect on our own children and what their personalities are to see that they can maximize whatever educational system is offered to them.
Yeah, for us, Emily, it was a very straight situation because, we had places at the school for our children, the schools in which we worked. So enrollment was immediate and the tuition was covered for the most part. And so, for example, in the United States, we could have chosen another school, but there was no need. We were fortunate in that sense. So it was a very pragmatic, practical approach. Certainly no disdain for any of the schools in the national systems. Certainly it wouldn't have worked had the kids been with us in China, of course. But otherwise, no, it was just convenience, really, and practical reasons.
Well, for me, it was a bit different, like born and raised in Porto Alegre, like second, third, even fourth generation, parts of the family. my husband, ex-husband, and I, we went both to a traditional private school in Porto Alegre. So all the idea was like raise the children there, but I think there's the beauty of education nowadays is that you have many options, not only international, but different schools. Yeah. And so we did kind of the opposite that families used to do here in Porto Alegre. There was the local international American school. It is almost like it's already 50 years old. But in the beginning, it was just for young children. So the families would enroll the children, they would learn English and leave around the 4th grade. And we did the opposite. They went to middle school in Brazilian school, up to middle school, up to grade 8. And then my oldest asked to move to international school because she wanted to study abroad. And at that moment, the international school was really not opening, but was the first grade 9 with 10 students, the first grade 9 class with 10 students, and they had just moved to a bigger building. They used to be in 3 rented houses in a neighborhood. So we did that. Bettina asked us to move there, and then slowly I moved the 3 children as they completed grade 8 and spent high school there. And with behind me, a niece also did that, and others ended up. One niece in São Paulo went to Italian school, and she's now is in Italy, and 3 others, nephews and nieces, completed Brazilian schools and also applied. So there's no like cake recipe. There are many possibilities to go abroad. Yeah. And why we chose that, and why, because it's starting like the price is so much more expensive. So people were asking, why you're doing that? Do you want them really to go abroad? No, we want to really to open them the possibilities. And the idea that like our grandparents came to Brazil, and your grandparents, it doesn't mean that we have to perpetuate the family in Porto Alegre. Yeah. And it's kind of an easy thing to think for children, that a young person, that this is my world and I'm going to continue staying here, especially because most of the people do that, especially in a city like Porto Alegre. So that's what we wanted, to open more possibilities for them.
That's fascinating, Emily. I was thinking about that, and then Patrick, your pragmatic approach as a school counselor. I was given 2 admissions for my students to come to school with me, but I have 3 kids. I have 3 boys. And so I have to navigate that differently. I actually did send in Hong Kong. I did send my oldest for 1 year to a all Cantonese school, just to experience it. And I know that informing my children early for the language, Denny, I don't think any of my kids are going to be at 5 languages like your daughter. It doesn't run in the genes with either my wife or I, but instilling within them early this understanding of language, of culture, is so important. And so I did that for 1 year, which was fascinating and really good for my kids. And so that kind of leads me to this next question for all of you is, how did you navigate the process of researching? Because there are so many, Marta, you talked about this. I mean, there's so many different options. There's IB, there's AP, there's national curriculum, there's tests that you have to take. There's different cultural backgrounds that are leading the schools. So how did you go about navigating the process of researching and then selecting international universities? Now, speaking more about the higher ed side, when you sent your children to different places, how did you research that?
Well, I love to research international education. So I go ahead and do like before that, not with my oldest. Well, also, yeah. So I really have a good time, like diving into internet and learning about those different places. I think it's like, because I didn't have this option. I went to college in Brazil, stayed at home. So it was like a dream, and like something that I do with a lot of passion. So what I do, I go, I know them because they're my children or nieces or nephews. And so I try to find schools that would motivate them a lot.
It's a lot of research. Denny, I was looking back at my notes from years ago when I first was talking to Irene before you sent her off to college. And she said, I want to go to a place that makes me feel happy. And I thought, man, isn't that the number one priority in research? But I thought, where do you start? Like, I wonder if she said that to mom and dad. I want to go to a place that makes me feel happy. And I don't know, Denny, did she say that to you? And what kinds of ideas did you have
Absolutely.
for her?
Yeah, absolutely. We all want to influence our children, but, so in this new generation, it hardly works. So I am from the IT side, so, and then, when she was finishing her 12th, so I, got her a short internship, so in my own company here, very short one, so 1 month. And then I asked her, so how do you feel about it? So is this something that you would like to pursue as a career? And she came back and told me that, hey, no, IT is not my cup of tea. So you guys are, the exact words she said, you guys are too fancy for me. Yeah, so, and then she wanted to do, medicine. And then she joined pre-med course. But during the pre-med course, so she understood that, hey, no, that's not my cup of tea. I should be changing that. So she moved to management and IT for her post-graduation. But she always selected things that made her happy, so, and I realized that, so as parents, so we have for some influence, so we can show them what we do. But at the end of the day, so ultimately they make their choices. And this new generation is very, very wise and very smart than what we were at those, so ages.
The other question would be, what are some valuable lessons and takeaways that you've learned as a parent within this process? Denny was talking about some of the lessons he learned as a parent. And I guess some of the lessons his kids learned by just following what dad does and making sure that they knew that, that was available to them. But would love to hear your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. So we left the international school in Atlanta, Georgia, when our son was going into 11th grade and our daughter was going into 9th grade. So the conversations about college had begun, but not at great speed or great intensity. And they were tracking, I suppose, possibly for UGA or tech, mostly because of the Hope Scholarship in the case of UGA, which made things affordable. And there was no real conversations in the household at that stage about anything further afield. And at one point we were thinking we were staying there for a little bit longer than we did. But when we came to Hong Kong, that opened up the world in another sense. The vast majority of the students at HKIS Hong Kong International School were focused on the United States. They were certainly of greater financial means than my family. And that is a factor, not for everyone, but certainly it is a factor and a parameter that we had to discuss in our family. But in Hong Kong, the resources were the university counselors, one of which was Sam. They were excellent, they were thorough. The two counselors that knew every child. And then when they got closer towards the college application process, one of the counselors sort of took over because they had a specialization in a geography or a type of application. But obviously being done in Hong Kong opened up Hong Kong itself, it opened up Singapore, it opened up Australia, New Zealand, and the dialogue just got more, I think, by virtue of the age of our children, but also because of the world and the way college admissions is changing. It did open up the world.
I think that between the three of you, you brought up points that as counselors, Sam and I talk about a lot. I think that budget is the first conversation anybody has. It doesn't matter if you have $5,000 to spend or $500,000, but managing money, even when it comes to education, I think is a really important part of growing up and thinking how that works. And it's different, the different countries you're from. And this is a lot of the reason why I think there's a shift in Latin America away from the US. The price of education is astronomical there. compared to other parts of the world. And
well, Emily's other point is the return on investment. You know, we have this, it needs to be 4 years. You must do 4 years, maybe 5 years with an internship. And then 2 years later, you have a master's degree. And this is the trend that you have to go on. And I kind of want to get your thoughts as parents on, was not going to university, was exploring the idea of no higher education right after high school an option that you and your students, your children considered?
Yeah, we actively encouraged our son to take a gap year, and he did. And we actively encouraged our daughter to take a gap year, and she didn't. And certainly with our son, there were conversations about, you don't have to if you don't want to. You know, he saw the practical aspect of a degree of any type. You know, they can't take it away from you once you've got one, and it might be one of those things you just put your head down and do it and get it in the bag and then move on. But you know, he was very open to not going to university.
What can be done to alleviate the concern among parents that veering away from traditional education pathways like branded schools might mean fewer attractive employment opportunities?
I think the undergrad is might be the traditional, but it's the beginning also, yeah. And kids coming from a developing country, if they have the opportunity, they can be supported by their families. I don't see a reason why they wouldn't complete college wherever they choose to, because it really opens door for them a lot, very strong. Even if they stay in the same country, and especially going abroad, yeah, that they can.
I'll share some cultural flavor to this topic as well. Especially from my background from India, I never heard of a gap year until my children were in high school. So for us, there was no concept of a gap year. It was considered to be, even if you are not able to get into a university after your 12th grade, it was considered to be a failure. Yeah. So, you know, so you are not a good student. So that's why you were not able to get into a good school. And it was unimaginable for me to, you know, do a 1 year travel across the globe after my 12th, especially in those cultural, you know, standpoint, you know. So this is something that, I mean, from a global perspective, we can also bring in as part of our discussion. But I learned that when my children were, you know, so getting educated.
Yeah, thank you for that. And that's. For the sake of time, we have one final question. And I think, you know, knowing that our audience is probably going to be primarily counselors working with parents or universities, recruiting students who have influence from parents, but also hopefully that we'll be able to get this out to parents more. The final question I have is what advice would you give to parents who are considering or hesitant about encouraging their children to pursue higher education abroad or outside of the norm? And Patrick, if you want to lead us off there, that'd be great.
Yeah, I mean, the advice I would give, I think I touched on some of it already, is you know, let the student and the counselor drive the process. Obviously, as parents, sit closely alongside them. But where you see it go wrong for students often is when the parents have a very predetermined idea as to what is success for their child in terms of college application and admission. And they don't have the open mind in terms of, or the data, in fact, in terms of the range of choice available. I mean, 5,000 plus institutions in the United States alone, and not everyone's going to get into the top 10, top 20. And, you know, we need to have the stories and the data in front of the parents to, you know, let them know that they do have to cast their net wide. So trust the counselors. I mean, you know, I've been working in private international schools where the teams of counselors have been, you know, large in number and the caseload is relatively low. You know, in the context of a large public school in the United States or the UK, etc., these things are, you know, much less available. And in some ways, possibly that makes the process a little bit more simple if you end up knowing where you're going, because you're going to the local state college. However, from the context we've been discussing mostly this evening, sort of international students, global students, we've all seen it go wrong, Sam, haven't we? When people approach it, with their somewhat archaic stories, experiences, data, influenced very much by their friends or the newspapers, and it's just a breath of fresh air to see an increasing number of colleges come out of the ranking system.
So basically, I have two requests to the counselors, actually, not to the parents, if I may. So it's basically, the first one is that, so I really like the idea of you planning to have a committee of the counselors. Yeah. Because I have seen in my own experience that, so sometimes not all the counselors have a holistic view of all the universities, all the options that the students can pursue. I can give one quick example. So for example, so my son was trying to get into University of Toronto for engineering. Yeah. And he was very much determined to do computer engineering. But only the last minute, so we realized that he should have taken AP in physics to get an engineering seat in University of Toronto. And there was no, kind of guidance that I could give, or, anybody, the counselor could give to the student. So that was kind of initially he was very, very upset about that. So maybe a council of counselors, a committee of counselors, where you could share real life cases, case studies from the different, parent groups. So that would be really, enriching for the parents. The second one, I would say, as counselors, so maybe you could also explore possibility of expanding your support to the children or the students, at least to 1 year after they go into the university. Yeah. So for example, you help them to find the right school, but then also stay with them for 1 more year. It could be a paid service as well. So you could charge them for that, but then stay with them, because they also need a lot of support in terms of adapting to the new environment. So if that could be part of your discussion in that committee of counselors, so this is also a good model of, business for you. So that would be really helpful for the parents as well as for the students.
And if I could add to that,
Absolutely.
if this counselor could also help the parent, the first year is so tough. Like, I had my daughter moving to the US. I didn't attend the college abroad. So it was my first experience, and she wouldn't communicate, and she didn't, wow, how much is enough? How much you are helicoptering, you're not, but is she depressed? Is she doing okay? Oh, wow. And there was a family weekend. I didn't know about that. I didn't plan to go. So I took the whole family to take her to college, which was a mistake, because then I couldn't give her attention. And then 2 months later, there was the family weekend, and she was by herself because we didn't know in advance, and we spent a lot of money in August taking her, doing a family trip from Brazil. So that type of information can be so important for families that are in another country and have no idea of that system. They're just reading about it and trying to be their best. So, and the college counselors are usually like based on the same city, so they understand the local society where this kid is coming from. So that's cheap, because it can be done by Zoom and of course can charge us, but would be, wow. Family that is paying for college can add a little bit, and it's precious. It's our relationship with the kid that just left the nest. Yeah.
Marta, I really appreciate that in there, and it reminds me of the counselor that I worked with in a committee setup. Madeline and I worked together for nearly 8 years, and she would have every student and every parent stand up and do like a pledge that they would essentially cherish this moment, because for us as counselors, it's our every year, 20, 25, 30 years. This is what we know, but this is oftentimes the students first and only, and the parents first and only experience. And it is important to cherish that moment and to celebrate those dance recitals, and to celebrate those things that a student does when they're home, when they're home and not surrounded by their friends, and they don't have to keep those pretenses up, they can do what they love, and what they love to do at home, just exploring the things they think about. Those are valuable insights to be able to share with counselors that help us see students in different ways, so that we can encourage them to go to a university, maybe in a place they'd never considered of, because of the languages they're interested in, or the research that they're doing. So thank you all for joining us on Global Minds Unleashed. The shed was open. We had a great state of higher education discussion. We talked about the world, and I hope that the tools that you equipped others with will be used well.